Bwong. Holy crap.
Hey guys, our video this week is on the second Dark Lord for Villain Month, Darth Sidious, also known as Emperor Palpatine, Dark Lord of the Sith, from the Star Wars franchise. We'll be going over his Disney canon story. See our video on legendary canon lightsabers here for an explanation of the difference between old and new canon, as well as his powers and abilities.
Okay, so the first thing to know about Palpatine, or at least the thing that the fewest number of people will know, is that the wrinkled old bastard had a first name. Taryn didn't know this until research, and I'd only found out before that because of a recent meme. But the Emperor has a first name. Now in our, and likely your, defense, he didn't have one until fairly recently. Even going through legendary canon, all the books, comics, games, etc., no first name was ever given for the Emperor until 2014 with the release of the book Tarkin, about, you guessed it, Grand Moff Tarkin, wherein it is revealed that the Emperor's first name was Sheev Palpatine. We can't decide if that's cool or just awful, but it certainly doesn't carry the Dark Lord vibe, so the fact that he goes by his last name, or Darth Sidious, is really no surprise.
So for real though, the story of Palpatine begins on Naboo. He was born there, a Naboo native, and sometime in his youth, prior to the beginning of his political career, was found and trained in the ways of the dark side by Darth Plagueis. The older Sith encouraged Palpatine's political pursuits and even assisted him in gaining power and influence during Palpatine's training. But, being Sith, Palpatine eventually slew his master, taking his place as Master of the Sith and beginning his own legacy, complete with his first Sith apprentice, Darth Maul. As a quick note for those who aren't in the know, Palpatine killed Plagueis for two reasons. First, Palpatine was selfishly power-hungry. Though he didn't mind sharing the rewards for his actions and was very patient, ultimately he wanted all the power available for himself, and himself alone. Second, during Palpatine's lifetime, the Sith zealously practiced the Rule of Two. The Rule of Two was established a millennium prior to Palpatine's life by Darth Bane. If you've ever played any of the Old Republic games or read the books and comics that take place during that era, you'll know that in days gone by, Sith existed in large numbers, just like the Jedi from movies 1 through 3 did. But Darth Bane changed all that. While the details of his story have changed from legendary to Disney canon, the important essence of his character has remained the same. He believed that large numbers of Sith led to infighting, which led to weakness, failure, and a dilution of knowledge and power. Additionally, Bane believed that any societal structure that avoided that weakness was contrary to the very nature of the dark side. Ergo, for the Sith to thrive, to eventually destroy their enemies, the Jedi, and to rule the galaxy in darkness, there could be only two Sith at any given time. A master, one who embodies the knowledge and power of the dark side, and an apprentice, one who would learn and crave all the power and knowledge the master possessed. In this way, the Sith studied and grew in power for roughly 1,000 years, creating lifetimes of study, growth, power, and research that all culminated in the form of Emperor Sheev Palpatine, the man who would become ruler of the galaxy and last in the line of Sith Masters under the Rule of Two. For those wondering, Snoke was not technically a Sith, merely a powerful practitioner of the dark side. Therefore, at least as of Episode 8, Kylo Ren would not be a Sith either, making Palpatine the last Sith Lord under the Rule of Two in Disney canon.
Though he would not acquire Plagueis' vaunted abilities of immortality, Palpatine did eventually reach a point where he decided that he had learned all that Plagueis had to teach him, and slew his teacher in his sleep, taking his place as Dark Lord of the Sith.
Did you ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise?
The newly minted Lord of the Sith would then proceed with long-laid plans for the conquering of the entire known galaxy. And despite the fact that his target empire was larger in scale than either of our other two Dark Lords, Darth Sidious is the only Dark Lord on this list who actually succeeded in his goal before being defeated. He started his conquest, as one might suspect based on the rest of this video, with politics. During his time as a senator for Naboo, Palpatine established relationships and made contacts with senators and power figures from across the galaxy, slowly maneuvering himself into position to gain even greater power. When he was ready, he set plans into motion by convincing powerful members of the Trade Federation to blockade his home planet of Naboo, in an effort to manipulate political events in his favor. Though not all would go according to plan as events were put into motion, his final goal was still realized. The young Queen Amidala, ruler of Naboo, made it to Coruscant despite the Trade Federation's blockade and the effort of Palpatine's own apprentice, Darth Maul. But once there, Palpatine was able to convince the young and politically inexperienced, not to mention allied queen, to start a vote that ousted the current Supreme Chancellor of the Republic from office. With the power vacancy available, Palpatine used his considerable political acumen, and the goodwill and sympathy brought by the situation involving his home planet, which, remember, he created, to become the Supreme Chancellor of the Galactic Republic. Now at this point, in many ways, Palpatine had already succeeded at his goal of ruling the galaxy. However, the Galactic Republic was just that, a republic, meaning that the office of Chancellor, while incredibly powerful, still had to bend or at least deal with the whims of politics and politicians. Politics, law, loopholes, and politicians that he himself had already manipulated to gain power, meaning he neither had absolute sovereignty nor surety and safety in his newfound position. What's more, the office had limited terms, so given time he would eventually lose his position as matter of course. He had power now, but he needed to solidify it. He was Darth Sidious, but he was not yet the Emperor.
As such, working together with his newest apprentice, Darth Tyrannus, as Darth Maul was believed to have been slain during the events surrounding Naboo, who was known to the galaxy at large as Count Dooku, Darth Sidious arranged for a massive cabal of planetary systems to attempt to violently secede from the Republic, in what became known simply as the Separatist Movement, with Count Dooku acting as the head of the Separatists. In response to this attempted separation, and the presumed threat that it created, Palpatine convinced the Galactic Senate to grant him emergency war powers, essentially increasing what he was legally allowed to do, and decreasing the red tape that stood in the way of his doing it. As his first order of business, he created the, quote, Grand Army of the Republic, which was an army formed of clones that he and Dooku had secretly maneuvered into existence. Years prior to Palpatine gaining these emergency powers, a Jedi by the name of Sifo-Dyas had foreseen a war that would ravage the galaxy, a war he believed the Republic, which had no standing army, would need an army to survive. He put his ideas and opinions forward to the Jedi Council, but they rejected his apparently warmongering plans, and so he secretly met with the cloning specialists of Kamino, pretending to have authority and approval from the Council and the Senate in order to commission a massive clone army for their use. Palpatine and Dooku discovered Sifo-Dyas' plans, killed him, and quietly took over the project, thereafter funding the cloning of the army, finding a clone template in the form of skilled bounty hunter Jango Fett, and having Dooku erase Kamino from the Jedi archives entirely. As such, when Palpatine was granted all that extra power and influence, he called on this recently revealed clone army to act as the Republic's defense against the Separatists. So it was that the Galactic Clone War began, with Darth Sidious pulling the strings on both sides.
During the course of the war, Palpatine continually pushed, prodded, and pulled at both sides of the conflict, slowly and unsuspectingly maneuvering events so that the Chancellor position was granted more and more power and authority, even extending his term until at least the end of the war. A term adjustment that was met with rabid approval by the Republic at large due to his skilled political machinations and his seemingly graceful and heroic handling of the Clone Wars, with hardly anyone suspecting a thing. In truth, the idea that Chancellor Palpatine was evil was so preposterous to everyone that years earlier, when Count Dooku had told Obi-Wan point-blank that he'd discovered
hundreds of senators are now under the influence of a Sith Lord called Darth Sidious.
I don't believe you.
Obi-Wan hadn't even paused to consider the possibility. What's more, even when the Jedi Council began to suspect Palpatine of nefarious plans, they never realized he had been a Sith in their midst the entire time. They merely believed him to be a power-hungry politician before they were confronted with evidence of his true nature, brought to them by Anakin Skywalker, one of their own. But by this time, Palpatine finally had all the power, political and public support that he needed, and the Jedi themselves allowed him to enact the final stage of his plan. When confronted by the Jedi about his true identity as the Lord of the Sith, Palpatine engaged all 4 Jedi Masters in his presence in combat, dispatching 3 of them in seconds, and engaging the mightiest number of their Jedi Order, Master Mace Windu, in single combat moments later. He would ultimately lose in this saber duel, a fact which has been confirmed by George Lucas as an actual defeat, not a ruse, though the fanbase heavily debates still whether or not Palpatine would have lost the entire conflict had Anakin not shown up. But Anakin did arrive, and beginning his stint as Darth Vader, Palpatine's final and most powerful apprentice, turned the tide of battle in Palpatine's favor. Palpatine then used the Jedi attempt on his life to his favor, displaying the wounds he had suffered in battle as proof of the Jedi's supposed treachery. He declared the entire Order to be enemies of the state and enacted the infamous Order 66, to have the clone troopers across the galaxy slay their former Jedi allies. During all of this process, he convinced the Senate to allow him to reorganize the Galactic Republic into the Galactic Empire, with himself as its emperor.
So this is how liberty dies. With thunderous applause.
Palpatine had now achieved his goal. He was the undisputed emperor of known space, lord of literally everything that anyone could see, master of the Sith, with an apprentice who, while powerful, was sufficiently crippled and emotionally broken as to prove little threat to him despite Vader's considerable innate power. For roughly 20 years, Palpatine ruled his empire with an iron fist, plagued by little more than a slowly growing rebellion. Finally, the Death Star, a massive superweapon capable of single-handedly destroying a planet, was created, and Palpatine thought his rule assured. He could do away with the Senate and its bureaucratic nonsense, and rule through power and fear alone with no one to challenge him, as was the Sith way. Not long after its completion, however, the Death Star was destroyed. The first major victory won by the seemingly insignificant rebel forces that had been a mere thorn in Palpatine's side up till this point. It would also prove to be the tipping point in the conflict, and over the next several years, though far from humbling Palpatine's forces, the rebels would slowly gain momentum, influence, and support. Such that, with a betrayal by his apprentice, Darth Vader, who chose his estranged son, one of the rebels, over his longtime master, Emperor Sheev Palpatine, Darth Sidious, Dark Lord of the Sith, finally died. His reign coming to an end in an explosion of electronics and energy as he was hurled off a ledge into, presumably, some kind of reactor.
Despite what some would call an ignominious death, Palpatine was a force to be reckoned with. Easily the most cunning of the Dark Lords we'll present this month, Palpatine was a master of manipulation, a politician of the highest caliber, and incredibly intelligent. In addition to these soft skills, he was also a fully realized Dark Lord of the Sith, the final culmination of a millennia of practicing the rule of two. It is safe to assume that nearly any Force capability that exists in Disney canon is in his repertoire. Precognition, telekinesis, enhanced physical speed and dexterity. He's also particularly skilled in the realms of the mind, as while all Jedi and Sith are taught to be able to influence the weak-minded, Palpatine demonstrated the ability to cloak his considerable Force presence from the detection of the Jedi's greatest, wisest, and most powerful masters, despite at least weekly face-to-face meetings with them for years at a time during the Clone Wars. He was also known for incredible skill with Force Lightning. In fact, in combat, it's his go-to move, and his Force Lightning is both powerful and adjustable. He's shown to be able to throttle the voltage such that he can slowly torture a person to death, or kick it up powerfully enough to rupture ship engines, and fry alien creatures with hide strong enough to resist blaster fire. He's also a skilled lightsaber combatant, and has been known to dual-wield lightsabers when desired or necessary. He's not invulnerable though. Like most evil overlord types, he's arrogant and assured of his own power, intelligence, and success. Indeed, it was this overconfidence that led to his death, believing Darth Vader to be so loyal to him that he'd watch his own son be tortured to death in front of him. But, like with Voldemort, this ego is at least partially deserved, as he'd handled every foe that came his way and successfully bent nearly the entire galaxy to his will. Also important for the Villain Month comparison, Palpatine is unique not only in his success, but in his comparative weakness, as he is the only Dark Lord we will present this month who doesn't possess some form of immortality. Though for the record he had his own take on immortality in Legends canon, but he hasn't been shown to possess the same traits or planning in Disney canon. Yes, that means he survived the destruction of the second Death Star in Legends.
And that's basically Palpatine, Dark Lord of the Sith, Darth Sidious, and unequivocally the most successful Dark Lord we'll cover this month. Not only successfully meeting his conquering desires, but maintaining his rule for a couple decades. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave us a like, and let us know in the comments down below if there's something you'd like to see us do in the future, be it lore or let's play. Also, if you'd like to see more videos from us in the future, go ahead and hit that subscribe button.
But in the meantime, guys, this has been
Two Men and a Mic,
signing off. Hey guys, you can click the link in the left for our last lore video.
You can click the link on the right for our last Let's Play.
And right here in the middle, that orb, you can hit that to subscribe.
Also, ring the bell if you want to be notified when we post a new video.
This is Two Men and a Mic. Thanks for watching.